This question came to me as I stepped into the rented mountain house, before anyone had even spoken. Have you ever been to a place filled with laughter and soft music, yet felt a tightness in your chest that you can't explain? It felt like holding a glass ornament in your hand, knowing one wrong move could shatter it. The house sat just outside Asheville after a light morning rain, surrounded by tall trees and damp earth. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, flowers waiting to be arranged, and new clothes hanging from cloth bags along the hallway. Voices drifted from room to room, overlapping with nervous laughter and the clinking of mugs against countertops. Everything seemed warm and festive, yet I felt a quiet unease settling into my body. I stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the fog wrapping around the hills, trying to slow my breathing. On the surface, my life was stable and well organized. At 38, I lived in Fort Collins, Colorado, where my days followed reliable patterns. I worked as a project coordinator for a regional healthcare nonprofit, managing schedules, deadlines, and logistics with the calmness of a practice. My apartment was clean. My finances were stable. I had built a life that rarely surprised me. This calmness was no accident. It was something I learned to protect. Growing up, stress had a way of creeping into our home without warning. Conversations could quickly turn sour, especially when money entered the room. Even when voices were low, stress was always there, hovering, unspoken, shaping how we all moved around each other. I learned early on how to stay composed, how to smooth things over, how to sense anxiety before it was declared. My sister Megan passed through the house like a spark of color. She laughed easily, barefoot on the wooden floor, her hair slicked back as she balanced her phone and a stack of place cards. She was a graphic designer, creative and optimistic, always imagining something bigger and brighter than what stood before her. My chest tightened with both pride and worry as I watched her. She deserved a wedding filled with joy, not the silence I had come to know so well. As I followed her with my eyes, I wondered how much she felt beneath the surface. Weddings, I had learned, have a way of drawing hidden things into the light. They gather families in close circles and ask everyone to show their joy, even when old wounds are still tender. Standing there, listening to the house come alive around me, I realized that I wasn't here just to celebrate. I was here holding my breath, waiting to see what might break, and wondering if I was ready to face it when it did. That first night settled in slowly, carried by steady rain that tapped against the wide windows like a quiet warning. The rented mountain house glowed with warm yellow light, but outside, the sky was dark and heavy. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cardboard pizza boxes, melted cheese, and damp jackets hung over chairbacks to dry. It should have felt casual and comforting. Instead, the air felt crowded with things no one was saying. We gathered around the long wooden table, plates balanced on our laps. My parents sat at opposite ends, far enough apart to make the distance obvious. They spoke politely when necessary, but their eyes rarely met. That single detail told me more than any argument ever could. It was the same posture I remembered from childhood dinners when tension ruled the room but stayed unnamed. My mother kept busy, moving from counter to table and back again, adjusting seating charts that did not really need adjusting. She checked her phone for updates on flower deliveries, murmuring under her breath, as if organization alone could keep everything from unraveling. Her smile was tight, practiced, and slightly too quick. My father stayed seated, phone in hand, scrolling and checking the time every few minutes. His jaw was set, the muscle near his temple twitching when conversation drifted too close to logistics or costs. He laughed at the right moments, but his body remained closed off, shoulders rigid, as if bracing for impact. Megan was the brightest presence in the room. She laughed easily, telling a story about a design client gone wrong, her hands animated, her eyes shining. In those moments, she looked exactly how a bride should look, hopeful and alive. But when she turned away, when she thought no one was watching, her smile faded just enough for me to notice. Her shoulders dropped, her breath caught. It was a flicker, brief but real. Later that evening, we sat together on the living room floor, stacks of wedding programs spread between us. Rain continued to fall outside, softer now, rhythmic and persistent. We worked quietly, folding paper along clean lines, the sound of each crease sharp in the stillness. Without looking up, Megan leaned closer and lowered her voice. I just want one day where everyone behaves. Her words were simple, almost childlike, and they landed heavier than any complaint. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. I nodded because I understood exactly what she meant. I wanted that too. Not just for her wedding, but for all of us, if only for one day. The morning began quietly, almost deceptively calm. Pale light filtered through the kitchen windows, turning the rain-soaked trees outside a muted green. Coffee brewed on the counter, filling the room with a familiar grounding smell. Plates of scrambled eggs and toast were passed around, and for a few minutes the rhythm of forks and mugs was the only sound. Then my father spoke. He glanced at his phone and let out a short laugh, the kind meant to sound casual. "That rehearsal dinner place," he said, shaking his head slightly. "It's got quite the price tag, doesn't it?" He smiled as if he were teasing, but his eyes stayed sharp, measuring. My mother's hand froze halfway to her coffee mug. The easy flow of the morning stalled in that single moment. She did not look at him, but her shoulders lifted just enough to show she was bracing herself. Megan straightened in her chair. Across the table, Daniel, her fiancé, grew still. He set his fork down carefully and kept his gaze on his plate, his expression neutral but closed off, as though he had learned this instinct somewhere familiar. "You said you were okay with it," Megan replied. Her voice stayed even controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. It was the sound of someone trying to keep a door from slamming shut. My father's smile faded. He leaned back slightly, arms crossing over his chest. "I said I would help," he said. "Not write a blank check." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the coffee maker seemed suddenly too loud when it clicked and shut off. I stared down at my plate, my appetite gone, my chest tight. In that silence, I was no longer an adult at a breakfast table. I was 12 years old again, lying in bed, listening to raised voices bleed through thin walls, memorizing the tone shifts that signaled when things were about to get worse. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, heart pounding, shoulders tense, breath shallow. Money had never been a simple subject in our family. It was never just numbers or budgets. It carried weight far beyond the bills it paid. It meant control and fear, pride and shame, generosity tangled with obligation. Sitting there, watching my sister's wedding begin to fracture over a single comment, I knew this was only the first crack. By early afternoon, the house felt too full of noise and cautious politeness, so I ventured out alone. Downtown Asheville is a slow, steady block, brick storefronts lined with streets, their windows reflecting the sky that was beginning to clear. The rain had moved on, leaving the pavement dark and shiny. The air smelled of wet stone, coffee, and something faintly sweet from the nearby bakery. I walked without a plan, hands in my jacket pockets, the steady rhythm of my steps, letting my thoughts calm. A street musician sat on a corner, playing a soft guitar, the notes warm and unhurried. A few people lingered to listen, their faces relaxed, as if the music offered a brief pause from what they were taking in. As I passed them, a feeling settled with startling clarity. I had spent my entire adult life making myself financially invisible. I paid my own way. I never asked for help. I kept my savings private, underestimating my comfort, careful not to attract attention. Somewhere along the way, I had learned that having money in my family came with accusations and expectations, so I chose silence. The truth was, I had done well. I had stability, an emergency fund, and a sense of security that I had built up slowly and deliberately. Yet I hadn't talked to anyone about it. Not my parents, not my sister. It felt safe, like locking something precious in a drawer that no one else could open. This choice had protected me. It had kept me out of arguments and off anyone's radar. But as I walked past the storefront and listened to the faint sound of a guitar behind me, I felt the other side of it. My silence had also created distance. It had kept me aloof, watching from the edges, careful and composed, but not fully present. Standing there at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change, I realized that the patterns I had learned as a child were still shaping me. I had avoided conflict by making myself small in one important area of my life. And now, with my sister's marriage hanging in the balance, I wondered how long this distance would protect me and what it might cost if I held on to it. The night air was thick and warm, carrying the sharp, rhythmic buzz of cicadas through the trees surrounding the mountain house. The porch lights cast a soft, golden glow across the wooden boards, illuminating the faint patterns of rain that had dried during the day. The scent of wet earth and pine mingled with the faint aroma of Megan's rehearsal dinner menu still lingering inside. It should have felt peaceful, but I could sense tension before my mother even spoke. She appeared at the top of the steps, wringing her hands in a gesture that made her look smaller somehow. Lavra, she began, her voice low, hesitant, trembling not with desire, but with the tight, uncomfortable weight of shame. I need to ask you something. She paused, searching my eyes for judgment or understanding. Could you help cover a shortfall? I froze, the words landing like heavy stones in my chest. The porch seemed smaller, the cicadas louder, the night somehow holding its breath. I swallowed, careful to keep my tone steady. How big is the gap? I asked, though a part of me already feared the answer. She shifted her weight, glancing toward the darkened yard as if anyone could be watching. It's more than I expected, she admitted softly, and it's not just the venue, flowers, rentals. It's all added up. The number she spoke made my chest tighten, a dull ache spreading across my ribs. It was far from small. And as her words sank in, I recognized something deeper. It wasn't new. The tension, the fear, the unspoken arguments over money, the awkward compromises my parents had made over the years, it had never been resolved. They had carried it silently, pushed it under carpets, hidden it behind polite smiles. And now, without realizing it, they were passing it down to me. I exhaled slowly, aware that this was a turning point. The wedding, the carefully curated weekend of celebrations, had unveiled a truth I could no longer ignore. The quiet patterns of control, fear, pride, and resentment that had governed my family for decades were still alive. And I was standing right in the middle of them, being asked to choose to participate in the cycle or to finally face it. The night around us felt heavier somehow, but also strangely honest. For the first time in a long time, I could see the cracks in the carefully constructed facade of family life. And I knew that the choice I made next would define not just this wedding weekend, but how I allowed these patterns to shape me going forward. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the gauzy curtains, painting the room in warm shades of cream and gold. Outside, the mountains stood quiet, their peaks dusted with lingering mist, a stillness that contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. I sat on the edge of my sister's bed, wedding programs still scattered on the floor, and let the silence press in around me. Here is where I want you to pause with me for a moment. Have you ever been asked to step in and fix something that was never yours to carry? The question hovered like the scent of pine drifting through the open window. My hands rested in my lap, restless, twisting an edge of fabric, tracing invisible lines across the sheet. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing on my shoulders, the kind that families unknowingly pass down, generation to generation, and somehow it lands squarely on the ones who least want it. I thought of my options, running each quietly in my mind. I could write a check, hand over the money, and stay silent, pretending everything was as it had always been. I could refuse, stay true to my boundaries, and risk the tension boiling over, maybe even splintering my family in ways I didn't want to witness. Or I could attempt something harder, something that required honesty, courage, and clear communication, even if it meant discomfort or temporary conflict. The room felt heavy with possibility, like standing at the edge of a small precipice and trying to decide whether to step forward, retreat, or find another path entirely. My heart pounded softly, not with fear of failure, but with the knowledge that whatever choice I made now would shape the rest of the weekend and perhaps, in ways I hadn't yet realized, reshape my relationship with my family forever. I exhaled slowly, letting the quiet seep into my bones. The decision was mine. The responsibility was mine. And for the first time in years, I was aware that the right choice might not be the easiest, but it would be the most meaningful. The morning air was cool and damp, mist curling around the mountains, like a slow-moving river of silver. The light was soft, almost ethereal, filtering through the tall pines and washing over the small clearing where the rental cabin stood. Inside, Megan sat by the window in a plush robe, her fingers trembling as they clasped one another, eyes fixed on the swirling fog outside. I think they're fighting again, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of cicadas and the distant call of a morning bird. Her shoulders were tight, her posture a mixture of worry and exhaustion, the kind only comes from carrying someone else's conflict. I knelt beside her, placing my hand gently over hers, feeling the rapid pulse beneath her skin. I took a long, steadying breath. The choice I had been circling all weekend had to be made now. I felt the familiar flutter of nerves in my stomach, my heart racing, But beneath it was a calm I had learned to summon in moments that required honesty over avoidance. At the venue, just outside the ceremony hall, I asked my parents and Megan to step aside with me. The hall smelled faintly of fresh flowers and polished wood, the air buzzing with quiet anticipation and soft murmurs of the wedding party preparing for the day. My voice stayed steady, warm but firm, carrying the care and love I felt for each of them, even as my pulse thumped in my ears. "I love all of you," I said, meeting my parents' eyes first, then Megan's. "But this tension is hurting Megan. If I help financially, it will be a gift, not leverage. And after today, we stop using money as a weapon." The words hung in the air, heavy but sincere. The mist outside seemed to settle in response, the soft rustle of leaves and distant church bells punctuating the moment. No one spoke at first. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable, rather, it carried the weight of acknowledgement. Then slowly my father nodded once, brief but deliberate. My mother's hand rose to her face, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized was there. Megan exhaled sharply, a breath she had clearly been holding for years, her shoulders relaxing as the tension in the room eased. In that quiet, unspoken exchange, the family shifted, just enough to make space for honesty, understanding, and the start of something softer and steadier than the patterns we had all learned to repeat. The clouds that had lingered over the mountains all morning finally parted as Megan appeared at the top of the aisle. Sunlight poured through, dappling the wooden floorboards and glinting off the petals scattered along the pathway. The warmth touched my skin like an embrace I hadn't realized I needed, softening the tightness I had carried for days. Megan's smile was genuine this time, unguarded, lighting up her entire face. Her eyes sparkled with both excitement and relief, and for a moment, she seemed entirely untethered from the worries and arguments that had shadowed the week. The music swelled, a rich string arrangement that filled the space with life, and from the edges of the clearing, birds began their cheerful calls, as if celebrating alongside us. I felt something inside me shift, a gentle loosening of tension I hadn't known I'd held so tightly. The weight of old family patterns, financial friction, and unspoken grievances seemed to fade just enough to let me breathe fully in the moment. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, every glance, every laugh, every quiet tear carrying a sense of honesty that made the imperfections beautiful. At the reception, our family gathered around tables under strings of warm lights. Laughter started awkwardly, careful, as if unsure how to navigate this new, calmer space we had created. But as the night went on, the edges softened. Conversations flowed more freely. My parents even shared stories and jokes without underlying tension. Not everything was healed, old wounds never vanish entirely, but openness replaced avoidance, and that was enough for now. I watched Megan dance with Daniel, spinning and laughing, and I realized that honesty, even in its messy, imperfect form, had created room for connection. The wedding, flawed and beautiful, marked not just the start of a marriage, but a subtle turning point for our family, a moment when we chose presence over perfection and love over old fears. Back home in Fort Collins, the familiar hum of my apartment greeted me as I set my suitcase on the bed. The walls were painted a soft gray, the shelves neatly arranged with books and photos that anchored me in a life of calm routines. Yet even amidst this comfort, I could still feel the echoes of the weekend, the laughter, the tension, the misty mountain mornings, the quiet confessions, and the small but significant moments of courage. I began unpacking slowly, each item pulled from the suitcase, a tactile reminder of the journey. As I folded clothes and placed them in drawers, I realized something profound. The gift I had given my family was not financial. It was something less tangible but infinitely more important. It was a boundary, a clear line I had drawn with love and honesty, asserting that I would no longer carry burdens that were not mine, even if it meant discomfort or awkwardness in the moment. For the first time in years, I felt myself stepping fully out of the role I had inhabited since childhood, the peacemaker, the silent observer, the one who smoothed over conflicts while keeping my own needs hidden. That role had kept me safe, but it had also kept me small. Now, by speaking and acting with intention, I had reclaimed a part of myself I had long ignored. A lightness settled in my chest, gentle but unmistakable. My mind felt clearer, as if the fog of unspoken expectations had lifted. My shoulders relaxed. My heart, steady and calm, reminded me that strength is not always loud or dramatic, it is quiet, patient, and deliberate. Sometimes, I understood, Peace does not come from avoiding conflict. It comes from facing it with steady hands and an open heart, and choosing clarity over chaos. And, as I placed the last item into my dresser drawer, I felt that peace finally settle around me like a soft, enduring light. One I could carry forward into every room I entered, every relationship I nurtured, and every choice I made. The room is quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes after laughter has faded, dishes have been cleared, and the last conversation has settled into memory. Sunlight streams through the window, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor. I sit in a chair near the window, my hands folded lightly in my lap, reflecting on the weekend and everything it revealed, not just about my family, but about myself. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to gently tap the like button so more women can discover it. Each click is a small gesture, a ripple that allows stories of real family, real struggles, and real courage to reach others who may be silently carrying similar burdens. I would truly love to read your thoughts or experiences in the comments, especially if you've ever faced moments where family and money collided in ways that tested patience, love, or understanding. Sharing those reflections creates a space where we can acknowledge the challenges without shame, and honor the quiet strength it takes to navigate them. And if stories like this bring you a sense of clarity, hope, or connection, please consider subscribing and exploring more emotional journeys here on Voices of True Life Stories. Each story is crafted with care to reflect the real, raw, and tender moments that shape women's lives across America. As the camera, or in this case, your mind's eye, lingers on the sunlight spilling across the floor, there's a sense of calm purpose. This ending isn't about perfection. It's about intention, noticing, sharing, and carrying forward the quiet lessons we learn when we face life fully, with honesty and heart.